CeeLo killed this shit.
With the standard nozzle installed, the frequency response actually showed quite a few similarities with the Delta. The biggest difference is that the upper mid-range gain is a little higher, and overall, the tuning follows the GM1 target even more closely. The bass sits perfectly within the preference bounds, then much like the Delta, the lower mid transition is slightly below the preference range. In theory, this reduces vocal chest resonance, instrument body, and some of the warmth in the lower mids, trading a bit of the fullness for a lighter and cleaner presentation. That said, I personally think this also has a lot to do with the fact that this is a single dynamic driver. I'd say that a slightly lean mid-range is something many single dynamic driver IEM naturally tend to exhibit. Then main peak is a little higher than the GM1 target. In theory, that should make vocals and mid-range instruments sound slightly larger, while also bringing them a little closer to the listener. From there, the upper mid and lower treble decay quite naturally until you reach a fairly deep around 10,000 Hz. This is a fairly natural way of having the treble. It reduces the bite of things like snare drums and cymbals, keeping sibilance under control and gives the treble a smoother and more relaxed presentation. Finally, the response rises again in the upper treble. This mainly adds air, overtones, and a bit of shimmer, giving the female vocal richer breathiness, and adding a subtle sense of sparkle and openness to the very top end. Now let's talk about the vocal nozzle and the instrument nozzle. The biggest difference is that both increase the upper mid and lower treble gain. The 3000 Hz gain peak becomes higher and is also shifted slightly forward. As a result, vocal and mid-range instruments sound more forward, larger, and more immediate. That's also why these two nozzles make the vocal stand out more than the standard one. At the same time, you'll notice that there's an extra bump around 4 to 5000 Hz. The first consequence is that it increases the likelihood of sibilance. On the instrument side though, it also gives the snare drums a crispier attack and make the edge of instrument sound more clearly defined, which enhances overall instrument articulation and presence. So, in principle, by increasing the upper mid and lower treble energy to make vocal and instrument sound more immediate and vivid, this is how the vocal and instrument nozzle achieve their distinct character. As for the impedance curve, the impedance at 1000 Hz measures 17.3 ohm. The lowest impedance is 17.1 ohm at 20 Hz, while the highest impedance is 19.5 ohm at 2.9 thousand Hz. Overall, the impedance fluctuation is very small, just like the Delta. It's not particularly sensitive to source output impedance, so you should get a very consistent frequency response regardless of the source you use. In terms of sound, I would describe it as maybe Delta Pro Max. It keeps the overall character of the Delta but improves both ends. Starting with the bass notes are slightly larger than on the Delta. With the standard nozzle, impact is well balanced, neither too soft nor overly aggressive. If you switch to vocal or instrument nozzle, bass becomes a little lighter in character. The vocal nozzle, in particular, makes this bass sound noticeably firmer and a bit harder edged. Overall, the sub-bass extension still isn't particularly deep, much like the Delta. However, there's a noticeable improvement in elasticity. Bass feels tighter and more compact and has a very fast attack and decay, giving it a clean, controlled presentation. The mid-range shares a lot of similarities with the Delta as well. The timbre is very straightforward, very neutral, and a slightly cool tonality. It's the kind of vocal presentation I would describe as an ice cream. Calm, composed, and emotionally restrained. Note thickness and density are still slightly on the lighter side, but that also makes the vocal sound more agile and effortless. Just like the Delta, vocal sits slightly forward, bringing the signal a little closer to the listener. If you switch to vocal or instrument nozzle, vocals as well as most mid-range instruments are noticeably brighter. The extra upper mid energy gives you more presence and immediacy, making them stand out more clearly in the mix. With the vocal and instrument nozzle, string instruments actually sound quite good. Both nozzles increase the presence of strings, making them stand out more clearly in the mix. When a violin moves into the upper register, it takes on a subtle cool tonality with a faint silvery shimmer that gives it a pleasing sense of transparency. That said, on most tracks where strings are used primarily as accompaniment, the biggest change is simply that they become brighter, or perhaps more accurately, more prominent. Sibilance control is also well handled. You can still hear the occasional sound, but it never becomes harsh or fatiguing. Compared to the Delta, the treble is noticeably brighter. That doesn't mean it has exceptionally high extension or the kind of upper treble that seems stretched endlessly into the air. Instead, the emphasis is mainly on the brightness itself. The presentation is clean and transparent, but it still doesn't offer a great deal of air or top octave extension. And as for the soundstage, it has a typical width over the depth presentation. The image spreads more towards the left and right rather than projecting far in front of you. Overall, both the staging and the technical performance are quite respectful for the price.